Welcome everyone to week 5 of Interconnected South Asia and Burma course. And I'm excited that you all are here. And I hope you had a fantastic and restful weekend and ready to dive in to today's class, which is on the question of separation of Burma from India, British India in 1937. Let's start with a little bit of a video. The All right. So what we have is an archival footage from 1935. 1935 was very important because that's when Government of Burma Act was uh, passed by the colonial legislative government, which ultimately led to the separation of Burma from British India. As we could see in the video, there were lots of Indians. The initial part of the video showed the Sule Pagoda, and that was the Sule Pagoda Road. A lot of Muslims praying in front of the Jamachulia Mosque. Uh, Burma is a Buddhist majority country, but these were all Indian immigrants living in Burma, and we saw mostly images from Rangoon, and the place was full of Indians. So let's try to understand uh, whether the 1937 separation of Burma from British India, was it a partition or a separation? So the classic difference between a partition and a separation is that partition is something that is asked by the people who are being separated. Broadly, very, very broadly and loosely speaking, that there is popular demand for being separated out. On the other hand, separation is more like an administrative separation undertaken by the colonial government. So this is a map uh, from that time, 1937. This is Burma, and as you can see, if you focus on the left-hand corner, Burma within British India. Now, of course, we have to understand that in the 1920s, there was a broader reconfiguration of the British Empire. As you can see, all these places in red were under British colonial rule. Within the Indian Empire, you can see Burma is included, uh, so it's all still together. In the 1920s, the British understood that even though they had won the First World War, they were financially exhausted. And more importantly, there was growing restlessness in the colonies. So, in a way, they tried to reorganize the empire where there would be uh, some form of self governance in the colonies. And this was, part of what was the imperial conferences and the idea of providing some sort of imperial parity to some of the colonies. So there are different ideas of how this reorganization happened and debates. We'll not go into that, but broadly speaking, the idea was that the white colonies, which were settler colonies like Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Canada, would be given much more uh, autonomy and would be made almost equal to the UK. And this was the idea of sort of imperial parity. On the other hand, the non-white colonies like India, Burma, they would not be given imperial parity. But there is some degree of question on whether that was entirely true or not. So one of the things that happened was the 1918 Montague Reform report, in which, for the first time, there was a legislative council made for entire India, Imperial Legislative Council, uh, which would have some sort of representation from Indians. But more importantly, at the provinces, the British ruled provinces like Bengal Presidency or Burma, Madras, Bombay Presidency, there would be a legislative, local provincial legislative council, which would be which would have Indian elected members, but each of the provinces would be headed by a governor. So the idea of diarchy was introduced, which is the important portfolios such as finance, police, military be kept under the control of the governor. But at the provinces, minor administrative duties like sanitation, health, some of these would be transferred to non-whites. But as you can see, uh, in the discussion of the Montague Clemson reforms, it was said that Burma is, even though it's still part of India, but it had not advanced enough politically, matured enough to get the benefits of the Montague Chelmsford reforms. So then the governor of Burma introduced something called Cradock scheme. This was an inferior set of reforms for Burma, which was directly was not given, but some amount of representation was given. Communal representation was given to Indians, Europeans, Anglo-Indians, parents, uh, and creation of some district boards. But this led to a wide-scale agitation on the part of the Burmese nationalists, and uh, there was wide-scale support for among the Burmese nationalists that we should stick around with India so that we can get the benefits of the reforms coming to rest of India. And this was ultimately achieved because ultimately the British government relented and diarchy was given, legislative council was introduced and diarchy was extended to Burma. But the British realized that their days of holding on to India was becoming less and less. The challenges in India was becoming less and less. But they could still hold on to Burma by trying to take it out of India. So from the mid 20s, they began to support those elements within the Burmese nationalists who were increasingly worried about large scale Indian immigration into Burma. So they tried to give some sort of wind to that by bringing in a ₹5 tax on immigrants, ban on Indian bookies and bookmakers, and expulsion of non-Burmans who had criminal convictions. Then, of course, in 1928, a second set of reforms came, which was the Indian Statutory Commission, or the John Simon Commission, as was headed by Sir John Simon. Now, this Simon Commission gathered representation from across Burma. And many of the representation were given by Europeans or British colonial interests in Burma. Now, they were very, very keen to separate out of India, because then some of the reforms coming to India would be stopped, particularly economic advantages that Indian businessmen would get. That would be stopped for Burma. So, for instance, uh, uh, export control on tanning, coastal shipping, steel, rice, export duty, etc. But there were Burmese or Burmans who were in favor of separation. They also started putting in representation to the Simon Commission. Now, most of them, the important faction which advocated separation was led by U Ba Pay. Then there was a series of talks in London, which was part of the broader Indian Roundtable conferences, but there was one called the Burma Roundtable Conference as well, in which U Ba Pay tried to forcefully say that Burma could be taken out of India to be saved from Indian immigration. Similar discussion happened in Legislative Council in Burma, where U Ba Pay continued to say that uh, Burma would be swamped if Indian immigration was not halted. Then U Shwe Thaw, another member from Akyab, also said in similar lines that there should be restriction placed on Indian immigration. Ultimately, what we do have is the Government of Burma Act, which was together with the Government of India Act of 1935, and Burma was separated out in 1937. So, to recap, was Burma partition or was it a separation? In some ways, it was both. There was official support for separation, but there was also a partial support from certain sections of Burmese society. So it could be a separation and a partial partition. And this led to an administrative break, and it would have grave consequence for the post-colonial period. Was it India's first partition or forgotten partition? Um, that's a good question, and we will talk about that in the next class. So I have a small activity for you. Let me see where I can find that small activity. Right here. Sorry, there is some issue. with the activity. Just give me 1 second. All right. So this activity is basically that you have to match in the next 2-3 minutes. Uh, please take these handouts that I've already prepared, and you can see the activity here on the uh, projection as well, where you have to match these three colonial legislative reforms with their colonial legislative outcomes. Now, remember, each of these three legislative reforms can be matched with more than one. So you can discuss with the person sitting next to you and then let me know. Once you're done, then we can have a quick discussion on what the correct answers are. Then I can collect these activities from you. All right. So 2 minutes up. Okay, so the Montague Chelmsford reforms obviously goes with the Government of India Act 1919, as well as introduction of diarchy, the Craddock scheme, no outcome. The Indian Statutory Commission, Simon Commission, leads to the Government of India Act 1935, separation of Burma from India 1937, Government of Burma Act 1935 as well. All right, so I shall see you in next class. Please don't forget to put in the blog post. And if you have any questions, now is the time to ask. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Take care.